There has been a lot of people that say, how come Pixar films are so much higher above any other animated films? People questioned that for a while. They were making 4 to 10 times the same amount of money as other companies. There was something unique about it. And I figured out what it was. A group of people at Pixar wrote up what their 6 key rules were to follow. And that's what we're talking about today. There are 6 key rules for Pixar that will help every single director better understand what they need to do to accomplish great story output. So let's get started right away. Let's start out with the quote by a director. Pete Docter said, "What you're trying to do when you tell a story is to write about an event in your life that made you feel something in a particular way. And what you're trying to do when you tell a story is to get the audience to have that same feeling. It is all about how did it make me feel." A lot of people watch a movie and they can tell you how they felt about it much easier than they can tell you what the film was about. Interesting how the emotions stay with us. So let's dive into the rules. We have the first rule right off the bat. It's really easy. Create stories that are universal. So too many directors, when they start out, they have their mind set on one specific area of focus, and that's what they're going to focus in on, and they're going to do nothing but look at those things, and okay, yeah, there's a smaller audience, but somehow they're going to miraculously get more people to show up at the theater and make lots and lots of money. How's that? No, if you want lots of people to show up, the story has to be aimed at lots of people. So your story has to be universal. It has to be something that everyone can relate to, or there's an aspect to it that people can at least understand why things play out the way it does. Okay, rule number 2 for Pixar. Great stories have a clear structure and purpose. Now, a lot of people talk about structure, but very few people follow structure. How's that hit you? You know, the film industry and television industry is all about a bunch of creatives coming together, some of them with ADHD. They just can't keep focused. It's up to the director to make sure everyone understands the purpose of the film, the purpose that the audience is supposed to receive from the film, which might be a little bit different than why the film's being made, and what the structure is. And the structure has to be clear and simple so everybody understands, to make sure that that structure is in every single scene. All too often, when you look at a failed film, is because the structure was not followed or adhered to. Usually what happens is people start getting really creative and stuff, and it's like, oh, yeah, we were so creative, we actually cut out the segment of the story that had to be in that scene for everything to make sense. So you have to be really careful. In fact, I taught at a conference one time, and I was teaching a bunch of young filmmakers this process of structure. We sat down for a half hour, discussed the structure of a scene. They then went out in teams, shot the scenes, came back, did post-production, and then brought it back to my class, and we reviewed it. And here's the funny part. Out of the 4 teams that we specifically talked about the structure, when they came back and showed their films, every one of their films had a different story because none of them had followed the structure. So the goal was not met. Nobody got bonuses that day. But they did all learn how critically important it is to follow a strong structure and to adhere to it. And that's what makes Pixar as great as it is. They always adhere to their fantastic story structures. Okay, rule number 3. Great stories have a character that the audience can root for. Yes, it's a must. It's absolutely critically important that there is a character that people can go after and chase and say, yes, go for it, go for it. You know, in Back to the Future, which is a film that is quite old, but still talked about even today, everyone knew that Marty had to get back to the future. Even the title said, Back to the Future. It was really easy for people to cheer him on when he battled against Biff and all the other characters and obstacles that he had to overcome. Everyone knew that he had to make sure his parents kissed so that he would live and his family would come about and be, so time hadn't changed. And then he had to get back to the future so he could live again. So it was really easy to root for him. PIXAR makes sure that you know who the main character is in every one of their films, who you need to root for to overcome their challenges to get to their final goal. That is something that needs to be in every film, not just PIXAR films. Okay, rule number 4. Great stories appeal to our deepest emotions. See, there has to be a heartfelt moment or a reason to need the goal to be succeeded. Not quite the way to say it. You need the main character to succeed at achieving the goal. And that has to be tied to something deep in our hearts as far as what we as a people really want to see accomplished. That's the thing. We want the audience from time to time to hold their breath, hoping that something happens in this scene, or cheer when something happens that was like, oh, phew, he made it, or whatever it might be. It has to have that kind of emotional context so that there can be an emotional success of the story itself. Okay, rule number 5. Great stories are surprising and unexpected. Now, that unexpected thing could just be something like this. Okay, I know that was a cheap shot. But the fact is, you have to have some kind of story surprises or at least unexpected twists and turns to keep the interest of the audience. The audience has to be reestablished, reincorporated back into the plot line every so often because there's so many things to distract us. Sometimes directors distract. You know, I know a director that loved this one special effect he had, so instead of using it once or twice sparingly in the film so that it really stood out as a thing that moved the story forward, he decided to just use it a lot, and it's like the audience got like, oh, this again. And they weren't thinking of story anymore. They were thinking about, oh, the effect again. Oh, the effect again. You don't want to have anything take them out of the story. And at the same time, you know they're going to get out of the story every now and again, whether it's the guy whose phone in the next seat over is ringing or what it might be. You need to refocus them. And the best way to do it is to give them something unexpected in the story, give them something that's surprising or startling, give them something to re-grab their attention, pull them right back into the story, and make sure that they are still invested in the outcome of the story. That's the key. Rule number 5, always needed. Okay, rule number 6. Great stories are simple and focused. Now, this is one of the hardest things to get new filmmakers to understand. If you can't tell your story in 1 to 2 sentences, you're not going to be able to tell it in 90 minutes. You have to be able to know exactly what the true part of your story is, what the through line is going to be for your story to stay successful. You have to know who the main character is, why you're following them, what they have to overcome and achieve, how they grow, so that we can see the change that happened as a result of the decisions they make and the consequences they faced. There's all kinds of things like that that you have to be looking at from a director's perspective. I know one guy who had a film where he was more interested in the content of what was going on in the story than the storyline itself. What I mean by that is that he did a film, it was a faith-based film, and he had his film be about prayer. Okay, so there were scenes where the person was just sitting in a closet praying. Now, that could be good if we're seeing some internal development going on with the person and to change happening as a result of that. But if we're just watching them speak into the air, what good is that? There has to be something that happens. If it's just slapped on, like gratuitous sex is slapped on in an R-rated film, it doesn't work. It has to be all incorporated. So whatever that simple storyline is that keeps the focus. Now, what this guy did was the first half of this film was about this woman, and the second half of the film was about her husband. Well, that means he had two films that were short and stuck them together. We didn't see the full development of either character as a result. And even though his concept was simple, the story structure was not simple. The focus was not on one person to see him all the way through the decision-making process. It jumped to another person. In fact, there was actually a third person it jumped to for a while as well. You have to have your story, at least until you're an expert, be about one person. Not two, not three, not 10. Just be about one person. And it has to be focused. You have to know what they grow from and into. You need to know their thought process and what decisions they make that drive certain actions, that cause certain consequences. We have to see that all play out. And every scene needs to be that focused so we know each scene is accomplishing something. Having a scene in there that doesn't accomplish something, total waste. Total waste of time. So there's a reason why PIXAR has great films. It's because they follow those 6 rules that they have created because they've watched a gazillion movies and they know what works. My suggestion, watch a gazillion PIXAR movies, figure out what elements are working for them and why each scene is the successful standalone mini-movie, and then find a way to direct that in your next show. Have a great day.